Tess Gerritsen, and welcome to One Final Twist.
Today, we're excited to welcome Tess Gerritsen, who really needs no introduction. While you are new to me, these other two jokers have been reading you for much longer. But we're going to talk about the newest book, The Shadow Friend. So, this is the newest book in the Martini Club series. Why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
All right, well, it is the third book. It was started by something in my hometown. The very first book was called uh I have to think about what it was
Spy
called.
Coast.
The Spy Coast, my gosh. Okay, the Spy Coast was started because of a peculiar aspect of my little town when I moved here about 36 years ago. My husband is a medical doctor and he opened up a practice and he would do occupational histories of his new patients. And we have a lot of retirees up here. And a lot of them would say, we used to work for the government. And some of them would say, but I can't talk about it. So after we heard that a few times, we began to ask questions, and our real estate agent told us, oh, they're all retired CIA. Well, we discovered we had landed in a little town which is very well favored for retired spies. And recently there was an article in Yankee Magazine, which is a Northeastern magazine, by a journalist who had noticed that in the Washington Post, many of the obituaries that mentioned a history of working for the CIA, that these people had died in a place called Camden, Maine. So other people have noticed it too. And as the years went by, I got older and I began to think, well, what is it like to be retired from a very exciting career? Maybe you did something that was, that was risky, or maybe you lived in places that were dangerous, and now you're living in this little town. Do you get bored? So I was just trying to imagine what it was like for these retirees, and that was where the first book came. It was about Maggie Bird, who has retired to Maine after leaving the CIA. She hangs out with four other friends. They call themselves the Martini Club because that's what they do, a lot of drinking. Um, and the first book was about Maggie's past. The second book was about a missing girl in town. And the five Martini Club members help the local police chief, whose name is Joanna Thibodeau, find out what happens. And this is the third book. And I focus on one of the other members, a woman named Ingrid Slocum. And Ingrid, it opens up 28 years earlier when we see Ingrid working as a covert operative. It goes very badly wrong. She loses two colleagues. They both get murdered. She loses the woman she was supposed to protect. And now it's years later, and that past comes back to haunt her.
So, how many books do you have planned for the series? Because I mean, each book is kind of focused on a different character, and there's so many characters in the Martini Club. Would there be a book for each character?
Well, I'm not really planning much beyond the book that I'm working on right now, which is number four in this series. And number four in this series really focuses more on Joanna Thibodeau. It's called The Italian Affair, and Jo gets herself into very bad trouble and needs the Martini Club to rescue her. So other than that, I have no idea what's going to happen next.
You got my question because that was what I was going to ask was do you have anything planned for Joe? Because she's one of my favorite. Those little side characters sometimes they're just as interesting as the main characters.
That's exactly what happens, by the way. That's how many of my series got started, was a side character took over.
Is there a favorite character of yours in this series? Is there one that sticks out to you that's a favorite to write?
Well, it's really funny because the one character I really, really like writing about is Ingrid's husband, Lloyd.
Mhm.
Um, and what the reason I think he's funny is that he feels more like an everyman. He was never a covert operative. When he worked for the CIA, he was an analyst. He sat behind a desk most of the time. And here he is with these four people who did dangerous jobs, and he feels a little inadequate, is the word. Maybe he's the ultimate beta male. And I always wondered, how did Ingrid, who's kind of a daring do person, how did she end up marrying him? So this book is really, the focus on this book was I wanted to look at their marriage. I wanted to see if I could put that marriage under stress and what would happen. And I wanted to see Lloyd finally show his heroic side, and that's was a lot of the fun of it. The reason I like Lloyd so much is that I like beta males. Okay, I married a beta male, and here he is. He's doing the cooking. He loves to cook. He loves to take care of his wife. And what happens when he's pushed into becoming an action hero?
Mhm.
So the Martini Club members, they have morphed over the course of these three books. They're more of a family. And I actually kind of felt like they were maybe even in book one, we all wanted more. From a writer's perspective, when did you know that they were going to be more than just friends?
It was the very first book. I didn't know that it was going to turn into a series. So I wrote the first book was really all about Maggie and the tragedy that drove her out of working for Central Intelligence. But in the process of that first book, when I find these characters around her, supporting her, being like a family, as you said, this is a found family, and realizing that these people would risk their lives for each other, that's when I thought, I want friends like this. I want to go to the Martini Club. I want to join their book club and sip martinis. And by the end of that first book, I just wanted to see what happened next. And I was curious about their histories, each of their histories.
So why did you pick a book club as their secret method of getting together to solve crimes? Because we all know book clubs aren't necessarily about reading the book.
Right, right. Well,
So
the truth is, their book clubs, they don't always read the book. That's the
Mhm.
problem. They really get together to drink. Um, and every account I've heard of spies and those who I know of who have been in the CIA all mention that alcohol is a very big part of their lives. In fact, there is a book out, and you can find it on Amazon. It's called A Spy Walks Into a Bar, and it's written by a bunch of CIA retirees who wrote down their favorite bartender recipes and where they discovered them. So they actually have like a bar recipe book. And I can imagine these five standing around drinking. The other thing is that they can't really talk to the outside world. They can only talk to each other about what they did. And I've discovered this secretiveness in my own town when I go around asking people about their past careers. They won't, if they were really spies, they won't talk. Their children will talk. And their children sometimes don't always know daddy was, or mommy was a spy until after their parents die. I've heard this story a couple times that mom died or dad died, and they went looking through their papers and found, oh my God, mom was a CIA agent. Or another young woman came up to me and she said, after I read your book, it suddenly became clear to me why my family lived in 5 different countries and why we had 3 different passports with different names on them. So a lot of times they just don't reveal things. But if you're with this group and you all know each other was a covert op, you can loosen up a little bit.
You started writing in 1987. I did a little research. Of course, I'm gonna give my age away because I read your stuff back then. You started out with romance and romantic thrillers, and then you got into some medical thrillers, and now you're into the spy stuff. Um, how different is writing a romance or a romantic thriller into a hardcore spy type novel?
Well, I weave romance into these stories as well. So
Yeah.
so it's like that part never leaves my repertoire. I think that what really attracted me to changing genres is always the story and the character that talks to me at that time. I loved writing romantic suspense, and from there I went into medical thrillers, and I went into crime novels. I've done a couple historicals. I've done a science fiction, um, and I've even done a sexy ghost story. And the real reason for doing the spy novels is really all about because I've gotten older and I wanted to write from the point of view of a retired person, and also because of my hometown. The difficulty comes in with the research. You know, how do I find out what it's like to be a spy? Luckily, there is a huge selection of memoirs by people who are retired spies. I mean, I like to think that you kind of tell the truth in your memoir. So I read a lot of those. What I was looking for wasn't, I mean, wasn't just the dynamics of spycraft. It was what kind of person does this kind of job? I wanted to be able to kind of, do a little psychoanalysis of the person who would become a CIA agent. What kind of person is able to live with a lie, who can, have friends and not never tell the truth? That takes somebody really special, well, someone really different.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'd be a terrible spy. I'd never be able to do it.
I want to talk about the age of the characters in this book or in this series
Yeah.
because I'm 50, I'm getting there, the retirement is in the is getting closer to me. Um and you mentioned that writing about characters that are, in your what do you say? Like in line of sight, people that you're around that you want to be around. Do you find that like not allowing their age to be a reason to sit down? Do you like that part or not letting their age say I can't?
Yeah, well, I happen to live in, as I said, a place with a lot of retirees who are still on their game. I mean, I I've seen 80 and 90-year-olds here who are living on their own, still stacking their own wood, still chopping their own wood. So, I mean, it's not hard to find um, not just physically fit people, but people who are really very, very capable of doing what they've always done. Um, Part of the fun of these books is blasting those stereotypes away. Now, when I go into the grocery store and I see a little old lady, pushing her little shopping cart, I don't necessarily think, oh, she's a sweet old granny. Now I look at them and think, who did you used to be, and did you used to carry a gun? It gives you a different opinion of what a gray-haired person is and who they used to be. And the other part that's fun is watching the conflict between young and old. I consider a lot of this has to do with generational conflict because Joe Thibodeau, our police chief, is only in her 30s and she's dealing with people who are twice her age. And she does not necessarily believe that they are capable of what they are capable of. And in the very first book, The Spy Coast, Joe just thinks they're sweet old people and can't understand why they're always ahead of her in every investigation, why they always come to the conclusions faster. What is it about them that makes them find out who this license plate belongs to when she hasn't even had a chance to look it up herself? So it's a it's that generational divide that is also fun to explore.
So why did you decide to put a character like Joe in against the older generation? Because there's a lot of, I think, funny conflicts between them because Joe will get frustrated that they're figuring this out before she is. And so why did you decide to put her in there?
Well, she's not only younger, she also represents the state of Maine in a lot of ways. She is, I mean, like a lot of people I know here, they're really solid. They're multi-generational. They've been here for a couple hundred years, and they are really invested in keeping their town safe and well functioning. And that's Joe. She is not only younger, she is morally grounded. She is a very ethical person who always tells the truth. And that puts her into conflict because she's dealing with people who, they can be morally ambiguous sometimes. They can do things that are maybe not entirely legal because they're used to breaking the rules. That's what they do. So watching her deal with these people break the rules and how that completely drives her nuts. So it's not just conflict. It's also, as you said, it's really funny seeing her struggle with, do I throw them in jail or do I let them go?
There was one scene towards the end of this book where they're all together and there's a young fella that's part of the investigation on the fringe, and she walks in and they've all got their guns out, and she was like, okay, that I don't want to give too much away, but that's one of those that classic, do I put them in jail or do I arrest them? What do I do? That's just one of
I
the
I
funny.
love that. I love that scene because they accidentally capture somebody who is not the person they think he is, and they've got him
Yeah.
on the sofa, zip tied, and he's
Yeah.
terrified. And so Joe says, "What were you going to do? Were you going to waterboard them?" And they go, "Well, we were going to get the truth out of him." And she goes, "Well, then what were you going to do?" And there's this like they don't really have an answer for that. They just said, but we would do it in a different jurisdiction, so it wouldn't bother you any. So yeah,
Oh,
I can see where she would be appalled.
yeah.
Is there a member of the Martini Club that you like to write the most?
I love them all. I think I love writing Ingrid because she's so smart and she's so quick. Um, and this focuses very much on her because let's put it this way. There is also there's a hint of senior sex in here.
Yeah.
Um, and because the other thing I want to say is, you never get too old for desire.
Mhm.
And here's Ingrid. Part of what she's confronted with and what threatens her marriage is that an old colleague from her past comes back into her life. He was also an agent, a covert op, and he was also her lover. And she chose Lloyd over him. But now he's back. Think of Antonio Banderas. He's back and he's
Mhm.
looking still really good. And she can still feel that hint of desire. And it's clear that, he's still got the hots for her. Yeah, okay, they're in their 70s, but that doesn't go away. That kind of thing doesn't go away. So yeah, I like writing about her because she's still full of life and she still wants to get the job done, and she's willing to break rules too.
Mhm.
I want to talk about the town you live in because I remember one of your interviews for the Spy Coast. You got a lot of questions about are people in the town
Yeah.
receiving the book. Um, has that really changed over these three books? And what do people think of it now? Do they want to tell you their secrets now, or do they still keep them to themselves?
Well, the covert operatives don't, and a lot of them are dying out because they are older. It's an older group. Their children will sometimes come up to me and at book signings and say, "Here's what I found out. Thanks to your book, I looked back on it." Um, I get a lot of sort of stories with winks and nods. And in fact, just the other day I had a cocktail party here for 35 people in support of our local newspaper. And the theme was spies and martinis. And a lot of our invitees were people who were spy adjacent, families,
Mhm.
family of spies, etc. And we heard some stories there too about what it was like to grow up. So you do hear people talk about it. Um, and I do take some of the local lore and put it into the stories. For instance, in the Shadow Friends, I referred to a conference. I think I call it the Stone Coast Conference.
Mhm.
It's based on a real conference we have in my little town every year for 40 years, started by spies 40 years ago. Uh, and it has to do with global affairs. So I think my local friends, they look at it and they're looking for the Easter eggs in the book. Who's she really writing about? What is she really writing about? Oh, I recognize that building. So I think it's fun for them.
You said you do a lot of research. Is there been anything that just s- shocked you to find out during your research?
Nothing that shocks me so much because I think I'm pretty up to date, at least with current affairs and what the CIA is up to.
Yeah.
So, I think my most interesting research for this last book was the history of assassinations by Moscow. I mean, probably about 50 people who have been assassinated, not in Russia, but overseas. They're not just defectors. A lot of them are defectors, but some of them are bankers, some of them are journalists, some of them are just people who are political enemies of his, and how often they just kind of fall out of windows.
Yeah.
It's it's one of these strange stories where you see another one fell out of a window and they're calling it not a suspicious death or a suicide. Oh, come on. These are murders. Um, so I did a lot of research also on the topic of polonium. The interesting thing about polonium, because that's one of the first murders in the book, is done with polonium. When you see that, it's from Moscow because that's the only place that manufactures it and uses it for that kind of a purpose.
If you were to go on a road trip with an author, dead or alive, who would you go with?
Oh, dead or alive. Well, you know what? Actually, if I were to go on a road trip, I would just hang out with a lady who I just did a signing with, Lisa Gardner. I don't know if you've ever talked to her. She's a hoot. And she loves to travel and she loves to go to exotic places. And I think the next place she's headed for is Southeast Asia, and I'm headed for Madagascar in a couple of
Oh.
weeks. So I guess we both enjoy crazy places.
Do you travel often when you're writing? And when you're traveling, do you write, or is that your time away from writing?
I never write while I'm traveling, but I travel as much as I possibly can. And it's funny, I don't travel places with the intention of doing research. Very often I will travel someplace and something about that trip will start a book. Um, Most of the places that I've written about in these stories I have been to, for instance, Spy Coast. I mean, I've been to Bangkok. I've been to Istanbul multiple times. This book takes place in the Amsterdam and Madrid part of it. I've been to both those places. So it's fun to pull stuff out of your own personal experiences and remember what it was like to sit in that particular, plaza or, to be in a little boat in Bangkok and the smells you have. And those are really great inspirations for new stories.
If I didn't ask this next question, I probably would be bombed out of my chair. One of your most well-known series is Rizzoli and Isles.
Mhm.
Uh, are there any plans to revisit that?
That not at the moment, not at the moment. I'm having a good time with these five.
Mhm.
I have not killed anybody off in Rizzoli and Isle, so they're still there. But I don't have any plans for them right now.
Okay.
The Spy Coast is in development at Amazon Studios for a
Ooh,
television series.
that was my next
So
question.
we will see. I don't know what the status of that is. I just know that they have a showrunner and that they had hired the writing team. So hopefully that will turn into a television series.
Maybe.
With you being in the middle of this series and knowing that more are coming and Amazon's developing, how does that work for your character arcs for future books versus TV? Or do you just say, hold on, I gotta let that go?
I just say, hold on, I gotta let that go. Like with Rizzoli and Isles, they changed so much.
Yeah.
And they changed. I mean, they made it a lot funnier too, but they also changed the basic character flaws of my of Jane and Maura. I mean, for me, part of the fun of writing about Jane was that she was such an ordinary woman, an ordinary looking woman.
Mhm.
She that was the chip on her shoulder, was that she was not the best looking woman in the room, and she had to deal with that. And then it was played by Angie Harmon, who will always be the best looking woman in the room. So you learn to accept that and walk away.
Yeah.
So that experience with that series really gives you a lot of experience for this Spy Coast one, because you've had that experience of, do I hold on to it or let it go? So what is your involvement with the Spy Coast? Do they pretty much take your story and you're out of it, or do you get to have input in it at all?
Well, they proposed having the very first season just be the first book. So it'd be like a limited series. And I
Mhm.
suppose that each season would be a different book, a little bit like Reacher
Yeah.
is done right now. I have no idea how much they would change. I know they were talking about one really, really shocking change for the first series, and I thought, well, I can see that because I actually struggled with whether I would have the plot twist that way instead. So I mean, wait until we see what happens. I don't
Yeah.
know.
You started writing when you were a practicing physician. A lot of people may not know that. But when did you know that you would be able to completely stop practicing and write books full time?
When I sold my third book, I think. While I was writing my first two books, I was working part-time as a doctor. But
Oh, okay.
the real time, the real thing that took my time was I had two toddlers at home.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was when I wrote my first book. I went on maternity leave with my first son, and that allowed me time to stay at home and write my very first book. So then I just kept on writing, and I was doing that plus being a part-time doctor plus being a mom. And after the third book, after I sold the third book, we moved to Maine, and I just didn't bother to get my state medical license here. So I just
Ah.
that's a clean break. I can't practice anyway. I'm just going to commit myself to writing.
Hmm.
So I read that you started writing on maternity leave, and when I was on maternity leave, I could barely function. Keeping myself and my child alive and everything else. How did you find the time to do that?
I totally get that, but I had two sons who loved to sleep. It
Oh,
was,
nice.
I mean,
I had the opposite. I had the
every
opposite.
so often they say, yeah, some newborns will sleep 18 hours a day. And I got one of those.
Oh
So
wow.
I used to have to wake him up to feed him. He still sleeps a lot. So that was, if he hadn't been that way, I'm not sure I would have been able to do anything. I mean, even taking a shower might have been hard.
For your members of your martini club, do you keep them? And since I mean you're kind of a pro at this series business too, do you have like a I want to call it like a murder board or like a board where you keep, like what you think they look at, all of their habits, separate, like a separate folder for each person? So you or are you just so old hat at this that they just come out?
I have never had a murder board or any kind of a Bible for any of my series. So I have a very good mental image of what they look like. My problem is I never remember how old they are. I never remember how many months has gone by, so how old would they be? And sometimes I make mistakes about, their ages or what street they live on. I mean, those are the kinds of details that don't really matter too much. Um, I I have to rely on a copy editor to catch me. Luckily, I have a really good copy editor who catches every single little weird detail, including the things I never thought to think about. Um, so yeah, you're right. Probably should have some kind of a dossier on each one of them.
Is there any advice that you could offer to aspiring writers?
Yeah, I would say always pay attention to your emotions. Sometimes, I will read manuscripts by friends or family, and I've often found that one of the biggest flaws is that they think it's all about the plot. They think it's about the police work or the procedural stuff, but really it's all about who are your people, what matters to them, and why should they be involved in this story. And that's why the first Spy Coast story came about. It was because Maggie Bird talked to me and she said, I'm not the woman I used to be. In my own head, I could hear her. And what I heard in that voice was sadness. And I wanted to know who did she used to be and what went wrong. And that was the impetus for that first story. I mean, I don't do outlines, I don't do summaries. I just follow the voices of these characters and let them talk to me.
That's kind of what I wanted to ask a little bit was like, what are they still trying to prove? But I don't know that we'll know that until the end.
Right. And the first draft for me is always exploration. I don't even know who the bad guys are. Um, I don't know where the story is going. I'm often surprised, which is a lot of fun. And it also comes out of sometimes research. Like I was doing research for the Italian affair, which is the next book, and found all kinds of little news articles that end up being important to the story that I can weave into the story, and it helps me figure out what's really going on. What are all these various threads? How are they all coming together?
So when you're not writing, besides traveling, what do you like to do?
I'm a gardener. I Anybody want some zucchini? I'm trying to get rid of it. And I loved, I play the piano and the violin, but mostly I love to travel because that is my real passion. I'm trying to do it as long as I'm still vertical because life is short, and I'm getting to the age where I see a lot of my friends start to have infirmities.
How has your process changed over the years?
Not much. It's still pretty chaotic. It's still, let's sit down and figure where the story is and what is going on. And I still write my first drafts with pen and paper. I
Oh
can't
wow.
get away from pen. I can type really fast. That's not the problem. And I'm the only one who can read my own handwriting, so I have to type it in later. But I just find that if I'm in front of a computer screen, I freeze somehow. It's because I see the words on the page and I want to make them perfect, and that stops me.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Going back to traveling, where are the next two places you want to go, either that you've visited already and want to go back, or that you haven't gone to yet?
Well, as I mentioned, we are going to Madagascar after I finish my book tour, and I already have on my schedule for 2027 a trip to the
Wow.
Silk Road. So it's the five stands, starting with Kyrgyzstan, I believe. Yeah, I like places that aren't overwhelmed with tourists, I suppose. Places with either cultural or natural history, things that are very enriching. So, looking forward to both those trips.
That definitely sounds fun.
How can our listeners and viewers find you on the social media and the interwebs?
Yes, I have a website, tessgerritsen.com. I am on Facebook and Blue Sky and on X.
Okay.
I,
What are
every
your
so
handles?
often, every so often I'll post on Instagram, but I always forget to.
Yeah.
So,
What's your handles on those?
Facebook, it's just Tess Gerritsen.
Mhm.
On X, it's at Tess Gerritsen, and on Blue Sky, I think it's Tess underline Gerritsen, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if people want signed copies, is there a local bookstore to you that they can order
Yes,
online?
you could order from two places. One is Poison Pen
Okay.
in Phoenix, Arizona, and the other is a place called Left Bank Books in Belfast, Maine.
All right. And are you going to be on tour?
Yes, I start off at the Poison Pen, and then I head to Southern California and San Diego, Coronado, Orange County, Los Angeles, um, mostly in Southern California, and then I come home, and there's always like my main bookstores.
Okay. Is there anything that we did not ask that you want to talk about?
No, I think you've covered it pretty well, and just keep in mind that even though people get older, they can still probably outshoot you. So
That is
never
true.
underestimate a gray-haired lady.
That is true. Thank you to Tess Gerritsen. Her newest book, Shadow Friends, is available August the 25th from Thomas and Mercer, wherever books are sold. Thank you to Megan Beatty Communications and Stephanie for arranging this. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see your name on the bestseller list August the 25th. Thank you.